Well, it's my great privilege and pleasure to have Professor Ian Plimer joining me today to talk about his new book, Green Murder, a very provocative title. Professor Plimer is a geologist, he's an earth scientist, and he's also a director of mining companies. Professor Plimer, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you. I'll wave it around.
Wonderful, wonderful. I want to come back to that provocative title. Ian, you know that we've spoken before. Obviously, I'm very supportive of the position that you take, but I want to ask a couple of devil's advocate questions because not all of our audience, I guess, is perhaps tracking. Most of us are swimming in the soup of the mainstream media, and that often messes with our minds. But you often say that it has never been shown that human emissions of the gas CO2, the gas of life, drives global warming. Can you just please unpack that for us?
I'm very much aware of the scientific literature. I've been looking at this question for 25 years. There is not one scientific paper that proves that human emissions of carbon dioxide drive global warming. Now, if this were the case, you'd then also have to prove that the natural emissions of carbon dioxide, which are about 97% of the total, don't drive global warming. Now, Senator Roberts in the Senate evidence at all that human emissions drive global warming. So you heard it first from the CSIRO. I've been pushing this for years, and I don't have an opinion. I have facts, and my facts are underpinned by the scientific method. And we have a huge amount of evidence to show the exact opposite, that carbon dioxide does not drive global warming. So the whole premise of emissions, the whole premise of cutting down our coal industry, I don't think has ever been shown.
That's very interesting. And we've got a little bit of a scratchy line, but we'll persevere because your audio seems to be fine. But we're often told that it's a matter of physics, that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere interacting with sunlight, that creates a warming effect. So we're told that supposedly settled science. So what you're saying obviously is very provocative and controversial. What do people say to you? What do other scientists who are on board with the global warming hypothesis, or what they consider settled science, what do they say to you when you say that it's never been proven? I think we might have lost you there, Professor Plimer.
I cannot hear the question, nor you, Lyle.
Yeah, okay. And we must have a bad line there.
More than a scratchy line.
Yes. Yeah, we might need to... are you hearing me there? Okay.
I didn't hear the question. I couldn't see you. I can see you now and I can hear you, but I didn't hear your question.
All right, we'll try again and just persevere for a second and just see whether we can make this work. What do other scientists who are on board with the global warming thesis say to you when you say that it's never been proven? We're often told it's a matter of simple physics, that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere interacting with sunlight has a heating effect. What is the pushback you get when you say it's never been proven that CO2 causes warming?
Well, the first thing is they use the word consensus. Science doesn't use the word consensus. Once the word consensus is used, I know that I'm not talking to someone who uses the scientific method. The second thing is that no person who's got an interest in science will debate me. It's climate science by name only. But I would argue that the methodology is not scientific, because when you come up with a scientific concept, you have to deal with all the areas of evidence. And there is 4,500 million years of evidence of climate that we geologists have been looking at for hundreds of years. We've been looking at this well before people got interested in climate science. And we can see from the past that we have never, ever seen a relationship between carbon dioxide and climate. In fact, we've had the 6 major ice ages formed at a time when there was more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than now. So these points get ignored by people who only look at the physics of the atmosphere. They don't look at anything else. They don't look at the effect of heat coming from below the earth. They don't look at the effect of carbon dioxide coming up from beneath our feet, from the soils and from the rocks and from deep down in the planet. So if you narrow the argument down just to dealing with the atmosphere and the atmosphere alone, and forgetting the effect of the sun, forgetting the effect of clouds, and forgetting the effect of what the earth emits and the history of the planet, you will come up with a conclusion that carbon dioxide emissions drive global warming. You haven't come up with the conclusion that carbon dioxide emitted by humans drives global warming. So scientists who make a that was a cruel wipeout. So this is the state of science at present, where there is one view and one view only. Debate is not allowed, and those with different facts from different areas of science just get dismissed because these facts don't fit with the narrative, and it's that narrative that keeps, in effect, a lot of unemployable people employed.
You make the point, I think, in the book and probably elsewhere over the years of your engagement in this debate, that 97% of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is naturally occurring. And I think you even say that the IPCC, the UN body that drives the whole global climate policy, that's their figure, and that only 3% is attributable to humans and burning fossil fuels.
Yes, and that figure's been around for a long period of time. I actually question that figure in this, my latest book. I question it because I can show, and I've shown in this book, the figure may well be substantially less. And it's substantially less because a number of the sources of carbon dioxide have been forgotten. Now, that 97% is basically emissions from the oceans. There's a small amount of carbon dioxide in the total atmosphere that we emit. There's a small amount of carbon dioxide that comes out of soils and elsewhere. But it's essentially degassing of the oceans. And the degassing of the oceans has a delay factor. We warm the atmosphere, and then later we see an increase in carbon dioxide. Now, we see this in ice cores in Antarctica and in Greenland, where we have had a natural heating of the planet, which is a normal process. It heats, it cools, and there are many reasons for this. We've had a natural heating of the planet. And then after that natural heating, something between 650 or 1600 years later, we actually get an increase in carbon dioxide. So we can show from modern measurements, which just happen to get ignored by those who are living off the climate scare, we can show that the emissions of carbon dioxide are related to temperature. It's not that carbon dioxide drives temperature. It's the exact inverse.
What do your critics say, Ian, when you point out that we've had warming periods in the medieval time, the Roman warming, and of course others that go back much further?
My critics don't answer me with any argument. The first thing my critics do is attack my credibility. And they can attack my credibility, but I've been a chair in various universities around the world for 30 years. And I have dealt with the scientific method for 5 decades. Whether I am a meteorologist or whether I am, as some sociologists call themselves, climatologists or climate scientists, doesn't matter. They have never argued the evidence with me. They've attacked me as a person. They've attacked me as a person because many of my skills can work in different areas. And that is that I have been quite successful in mineral exploration. I've been quite successful in adding to Australia's wealth by sitting on the boards of various mining companies. And that they attack me for. But they don't attack me on the evidence. They don't come up with contrary evidence which I can debate. So we're not dealing with science. We're dealing with a political propaganda unit. We're dealing with a restructuring of the way society works, and we are not using common sense. we're not using data, we're not using history, and we're not using all the other sciences to try to come to a conclusion that actually might be useful for humans. The satellite data, which gives a totally different record to the doctored surface data of temperature, is ignored. People are now not able to debate. They just attack the person, and any point I make, I'm very happy to debate someone on this. But for years, some of us have been trying to get the principal proponents of the human-induced global warming to come out and have a public debate. They won't do it. Why not? We pay them. Why not?
That's a very good question. And yet we see Bill Nelson from NASA last week quoted in the Weekend Australian in Graham Lloyd's excellent article about the supposed catastrophe of global warming. But he's saying 8 of the top 10 warmest years on the planet occurred in the last 10 years. Now you make the point in Green Murder that this is not taking into account history, because our temperature records, well, certainly satellite records that NASA would use, are very modern, and other temperature records have only been around since the 1880s.
Well, we can use proxies also, and to use words like unprecedented or the hottest or the coldest or whatever, illogical. They are illogical because you have to ignore the past to come up with that statement. Now, if we like to look at the past, in this current interglacial, we have had more than 9,000 of the 10,000 years in this interglacial warmer than now. So we are not in a climate emergency. We're actually going the opposite direction. We had a Holocene optimum some 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. And since that time, we've been gently cooling. And during that cooling period, we've had warmer periods and cooler periods, but the trend over those thousands of years has been cooler. You cannot write out of history the Minoan warming, the Roman warming, the medieval warming. You cannot write out of history the Dark Ages or the Little Ice Age. Yet to claim that we're in the warmest times ever, you have to write that out of history. The second thing you have to do is to rely on one set of temperature measurements, which are surface measurements, most of which have been, so they say, adjusted. And those surface measurements are not in accord with the satellite measurements, which give us a 3-dimensional view of the atmosphere. So when someone makes that statement, you have to then say, well, what is the evidence used to make that statement? What are the errors in your measurements? How were the measurements made? Who made them? And what corrections were put to those measurements? Now, this is why I argue that a lot of climate science is fraudulent, because we don't hear the reservations that are normal in science. And science progresses by having old theories thrown out on the basis of new evidence. And if you ignore that new evidence, what you're doing is you're sticking to a position like a dinosaur and never ever changing. And that's what climate science is doing.
And now, Ian, you've been really hammering this point for many, many years and very consistently. Your latest book is Green Murder. It's I think the subtitle is Net Zero, a lifetime of net zero with no parole. It's a very provocative title. You're accusing essentially the Greens political movement, the Greens political party, of killing people.
Yes, I am. Their energy policies in the US led to 200 people dying in Texas when there was a wind lull and a cold period over Texas. That the same is happening in Germany right now in this winter. The same is happening in the UK, where people have to make a choice. Do I eat? Do I have a warm shower, or do I have the heater on? We have the next extension of green policies are their wind turbines and solar panels. And the wind turbines kill wildlife. They slice and dice wildlife. They kill the environment. We cover some of the most beautiful areas of this planet with wind turbines. And then when we try to decommission a wind turbine, the concrete, hundreds of tons of concrete and steel is just left there. Now, no in other industry is allowed to do that. All other industries have to pay a bond. And if you don't clean up the mess afterwards, then that money is used to clean up the mess. The mining industry has been doing this for 50 years. So why not the wind industry? And then the turbine blades are dumped. And these turbine blades have some horribly poisonous chemicals in them. They cannot be recycled, and they're just dumped, and these chemicals leach out into the water table. So if the Greens claim they're environmentalists, there is no way they can support wind power. And with solar power, they sterilise millions of acres of fertile land, which could be otherwise used for producing food. The solar panels are made by slave labour in China. The solar panels have a short life, and again, they cannot be recycled. They are dumped, and the dumping leaches out chemicals into the environment. Now, the green industry is also telling us, oh, we must be wonderful and environmentally friendly and drive an electric vehicle. But they don't tell us that the cobalt for that electricity comes from child slave labour in the Congo. And these black children are slaves, and they get paid virtually nothing. They die underground in horribly unsafe conditions. They are dealing with toxic chemicals in the mining of the cobalt, and the mess is spread wide and far. So the Greens, by their very policies, are killing wildlife, are killing landscapes, are killing off food production, are killing children in Africa, and their policies by stopping Indians and Africans having cheap coal-fired electricity means that poor people in the African and Indian subcontinent, they actually have dung and twigs and leaves for cooking and for heating. And in huts, this ends up poisoning people, killing people, especially the women. The Greens cannot take the high moral ground. They try to tell us they're moral, but they're not. All of this information is available. If they doubt it, then with a 30-second search on one of these, you can find out this information. So how dare the Greens try to claim they're taking the moral position? Their policies are to deindustrialise the Western world, to bring us all into equal poverty, except for them, who are the elite and will be wealthy and well-fed. And their policies are killing people in other countries. I'm absolutely sick of the Greens trying to tell us that they have the high moral ground. They do not. Their policies end up killing people, and this is why the book is called Green Murder.
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree with you more, Ian. And the things that you've spoken about are well documented. You can even read in the mainstream secular media about the child slave labour in the Congo mining those rare earth metals. Those of us in the Christian world have obviously been concerned about the Greens' death cult for a long time on their views on abortion, even abortion after birth. Peter Singer is a proponent of infanticide, and of course, euthanasia. They just drive these death policies. But we'll put that to one side for a moment.
No, let's not put it to one side. Let's add to it. We have the benefits of Western civilization, and we have thousands of years of benefits, and that is due to Christianity. Christianity has given us the music we enjoy. Christianity has a history. Christianity has given us a set of ethics and morals. And now we have the Greens, who are quite willingly wanting murder children after they have been born because it just happens to be inconvenient. That's not good enough. And that ties in very much with their views on the environment. And that ties in very much with the whole political view of the Greens, and that is to deconstruct everything in Western society that has given us the wealth and the strength that we have. So we have Greens attacking every institution, be they the schools, the churches, the universities, all of the charities. Now, just tell me, Lyle, give me the name of a school that the Greens fund, or a charity perhaps, or a hospital perhaps, or a social service. These people are murderous hypocrites, and we need to combine all of our forces to fight them. And be this Christian, be this people who are from other religions, they need to be fought, because these people are knowingly deconstructing everything that 2,000 years of society has built up. We cannot let them get away with it. And they've started in the education system. We've had 40 years of dumbing down, and it now shows.
Thank you, Ian, for not letting me set that aside. The reason I said that, I wasn't wanting to assume that yourself, who I know, and we've interacted before in the past, and I've always enjoyed your company, but I don't think it's revealing anything to say that you're someone who doesn't profess to be someone of faith. I don't know whether you're an atheist or an agnostic, but what I do appreciate
Well,
about
what
you
I
is
am, and
you understand history. Sorry, I'll let
many
you
of
go.
my friends of the cloth call me a spiritual agnostic, and that
There
is
you
that
go.
I'm searching for spirituality, and I'm not as fundamentalist as the atheists, who I think are more fundamentalist than the Christian fundamentalists.
Yeah.
So I'm on a journey.
Well, we appreciate that. What I really appreciate is that you, as part of your journey, you're educated and you understand history. And I think you say in the book, or certainly in some of the commentary you've put out around the book, that the greatest threat to our civilization is not climate change or even China. It is the abandoning of, just the quote right, it's the collapse of the values of Western civilization, which I think those Christian values that you've just mentioned. So you actually
Yes.
see that as a greater threat, but that's certainly not where the priorities of our political class are they? We're looking in the wrong direction if we're trying to address the great issues of our day.
Well, our political class, and don't get shocked by this, but they don't care about anything except their re-election. They don't care about you. They don't care about your health. They don't care about the nation. They don't care about a struggling pensioner who might be trying to make ends meet with increasing electricity costs. They don't care. The only good politician is a frightened politician when they are frightened that they might not actually get re-elected.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with a very cynical class of people who have made a career out of politics, whereas in the past, politics was a calling and you felt you had to give something back using your knowledge and experience to society, but not so now. It's a career, and many people go straight from university politics into legal politics or a union or as a staffer, and then become a local member, and then enter parliament as a local member with aspirations of getting higher. So again, don't believe the fact that a politician is there to look after you. A politician is there to open your wallet and keep him in power.
Ian, I wanted to ask you about politicians because there's been many who have really tried to carry this debate in the parliaments. I think of the former Senator Nick Minchin, who was a very well-respected minister in the Howard government. He was very outspoken on this, copped a lot of grief, as you have Cory Bernardi, who's now no longer in the parliament, your friend and my friend, George Christensen, good friend of mine, who's now leaving the parliament and by his own admission just feels there's no way you can make progress with conservative issues. Craig Kelly, now out of the Liberal Party. Matthias Cormann, now running climate policy and net zero agenda for the OECD. Scott Morrison took a lump of coal into the parliament himself, into the chamber. It seems like Matt Canavan and maybe a handful of others are really the last standing. Why are the forces arrayed against political people so great that so many of them end up being roadkill in this policy debate?
Our politics is run from marginal seats, and it's run from the cities. The people in rural Australia who are blessed with common sense, who see how food and fibre, materials and minerals and energy are produced and transported to the city. They are very few now. They don't have an electoral voice. So people like Matt Canavan are representing those people. He's representing the beef cattle industry, representing the cane farmers up in his area, representing the coal miners. There are very, very few people now in politics who know anything about how rural Australia operates and how rural Australia keeps this country afloat. In Sydney, for example, if someone goes to Mudgee for a weekend on a wine tasting tour, they say they've been to the outback. Oh, yeah, I can tell you that on a clear night in Mudgee, you can hear the surf. That isn't the outback. That's coastal. These people have no idea, yet the power of politics is driven out of the cities. And all I can say is thank God for the rural Queensland electorates in the last federal election. Those are the people that kept people in the seats of George Christensen, of Pitt, of Michelle Landry. Those are the people that kept Australia sensible. Now, we have a huge battle in Australia where the average city person now lives in an apartment. They have no idea what happens to produce the wealth that this country needs. So this is the battle we have, where each vote is equal. We've had a massive demographic change. People in the cities are only interested in their latest Porsche and their cafe latte and which restaurant is now serving their smashed avocado. And I have no idea how they have become wealthy.
I can understand city people feeling like that, and particularly given the vacuum, the fact that so few people will speak up now and put the counter narrative. But it's not just city people. I mean, Andrew Forrest, who I'm sure is known to you, he's in the mining industry. He's lived his life in the outback, come from there, and yet he and his money and his wealth is generated from the mining industry. Yet he has now become one of the biggest proponents of net zero. He's pushing this so-called green hydrogen. Why do you think people like him have jumped on this bandwagon? Even went to COP21 in Glasgow and spruiked this whole thing against the interests of his own country. What's going on here?
I have only 3 words to say: follow the money.
So it's about getting the government subsidies, is it? I mean, he doesn't need government money. I mean, he's got plenty of his own.
I mean,
why does a man like Forrest need government?
We provide nearly 20 billion a year in subsidies for inefficient, unreliable, expensive energy. And that has replaced having cheap, reliable energy. There is a huge amount of money sloshing around for people to game the system. And that is the money that people pay when they have a heart attack looking at their electricity bill. That's the money that people pay when their employer has to lay them off because they cannot afford the electricity to keep the business going. It is a scam. Our government is into it up to the neck. Our government has made commitments which we can't possibly fulfill in order to try to look good internationally. Well, I'm sorry. I'm not part of that world. We have to look at our nation and our nation first and deal with international relationships afterwards. But everything that's happening with subsidies is against the national interest. We are consuming monies which could go into roads or schools or hospitals. We're consuming monies that can be used for much, much better purposes than lining an entrepreneur's pocket. Now, I don't have a problem with people who want to make a fortune out of wind and solar because the government has opened the door and allowed these opportunities. Simple thing to do is say, well, you've had decades of making unreliable energy from your so-called renewables. You must be very good at it now, so we're having no more subsidies. Simple.
Well, Ian, I would love to keep chatting all day with you, but I know your time's limited. The book is Green Murder. You might want to hold that up. It's published by the good people at Connor Court. And Ian, I understand people can go to greenmurder.com to order that from Connor Court. And
yes, you can either go to the Connor Court Publishing.com.au website or to greenmurder.com. And I have just come back from spending nearly 6 weeks in Queensland, where I signed 6.5 tons of Green Murder and inscribed books for everyone who purchased a copy. It came out in mid-December 2021. It was a bestseller by the end of the year. So it is, in effect, the Bible to show people how stupid we are.
Yeah.
And that stupidity is because we are so wealthy. The wealth that we have today is nothing compared with the disasters which we will face from this, and we can only learn from the past. And anyone who wants to follow green policies should go and talk to their grandparents and ask them what life was like. Yep. And history is the key thing to understanding the present.
Wise words, Ian. Thank you so much for your courage and for continuing to put yourself out there in this debate. I really encourage everyone to get a hold of the book and to be educated on this, because I agree with you. The consequences for our nation are dire for our children and grandchildren. Ian, thanks so much for your time today. All the best.
Thank you, Lara.